worth discussing because you got bigger problems. So.
No, generally it's 10 speakers.
10%.
Sometimes I see up to like 20 to 30%. What Colin was saying, the bigger acts will go down to 5 at times. Some of the
country acts will pay 15%. We've seen that a lot. You know, I mean, it really depends. It's kind of it has been sort of par for the course with the world that it's coming from. But I think in our 3 worlds, it'd probably be 10 points.
It varies from agency to agency, but essentially how it works is, it's off the gross of whatever you make. So if you make $1,000 at a show, agent gets $100. So
$100 is $10.
Yeah.
We're not rich. Just to clear. And a whole load of artists that play for $100.
Yeah. But $1 million $100 gigs.
Yeah, there you go. That's the goal. No sleep.
Maybe talk a little bit about the timeline. You take a band on early, you start to tour them around. As they get bigger, you get to bigger venues, you take them different places. Kind of take us through an artist, how they grow, how they change, how you book them, and even touch on internationally how you get people with gigs as they grow as well.
Steve-O.
I hate saying this, it really depends on the band. I mean, that's sort of the first thing that goes out. I mean, I can't sit, and there's no general rule. Sometimes it's wait and see. I signed a band called the Harlem Shakes from Brooklyn, and the record just came out, and we actually sort of laid low, and we didn't plan anything. We just sort of, let's see what happens, because we think once this record comes out, people are going to be calling us. And then we did, and this band called Passion Pit ended up taking us on a tour, and that starts next month. And it was just sort of the wait and see approach. And other times, and I'm sort of talking on a small level, and other times it's like, you know what, let's just plan really far ahead. We're in April right now, let's plan for a fall tour. Like if I was taking on a band right now, other than little things here and there, but like the tour, I'd probably be looking at the fall right now and being like, okay, if we're just gonna go for it, we're starting to get some buzz, labels on board, records coming out, in the fall sometime, let's just start cracking away if we were just gonna go out and start headlining. Of course, if it's a bigger band, we're planning already 2010, and it depends on the size of the band, the type of the band, the type of rooms you're playing. Certain clubs book up really fast, other ones don't. So,
yeah, I guess, it does depend. He's saying the right thing in the sense that, every approach is different. I think probably speaking, about young bands, that might be most appropriate at this point. I think the strategy has got to be, and again, it's like we talked about this earlier, but as far as like a game plan, a catch-all game plan that I think at least Jason and I would agree on, Stevie, you can chime up, is, if your one ace in the hole is your hometown, it's about not playing that hometown too often. It's about respecting that. Saturation is very possible. You want to achieve is you basically want to achieve that every time you play, it's an exciting event. And the people that are coming to see you are excited about seeing you, not, fuck, so-and-so's playing again, I'll check them next month or whatever. It's about creating that, and, again, it's like everything is different. And certainly one of the things that my band did when we were growing, back years ago was try to create unique bills and angles to stuff, and trying to the old Don King approach, or the Barnum Bailey approach of trying to make it an exciting thing, not just a show. And when you get to that, when you get that momentum going, and say it's once a month or it's once every other month or something on that level, it's about building from there and using those opportunities. And you just want to quality over quantity. I think is always generally a great approach, and thinking about where you're going to go. And as you start to grow the band, and again, this is real generalities, but when you start to grow the band and get to a point, it's about thinking strategically about the next step. And that's what Steven's saying, is that you always got to leave time for promotion, there's that time for setup, and for things to click and happen, and that last minute opportunities are often just wasted opportunities, and there's something that goes and comes and doesn't have the impact. You're much better off, even though it feels like and everyone carries a sense of urgency, probably not any more than the 3 of us, but we need this done now, it needs to go now. But it's always about thinking about what is that, if that date is the carrot, it happens at one moment, what is the lead up to it, what is the impact, and what will be the result after that, and thinking that through, even at a small level, is a great practice, because that's how we book our bands. When we play a venue in Ottawa, we think about what's the next play in Ottawa. We play a venue in Toronto, we think about where do I go next, and that's always relative, and that's why you sometimes get people going, why is such and such a band playing this room? Well, because the reality is the next biggest room, and probably the room past that, is such a giant jump. I know it will make more sense for me to do multiples in that room and grow it to a point where I bring it and that is my finale on this album cycle, or etc.
I'm going to say something general. I mean, if you don't plan, I don't think you have a strong foundation. It's a very general statement, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. So, I mean, if there's a lot of bands and artists in this room, I'd be absolutely shocked if you came to me after we're done here and told me you didn't have a 6, 10, 12, 24-month plan and how you're to go from point A to point B. So I actually do believe planning is everything. I think you're really going to accomplish a lot more if you have a strong plan.
And even taking it back one more step, keep practicing and don't even show your faces live until you're good. A band like the Arcade Fire, they were testing out new drummers and new things for a year before it broke out, and then they got it and it clicked, and people went ape shit from the first show. And that's a perfect example of that. Another one is Plants and Animals, sort of a up-and-coming band that I work with. They sat and worked on the record for 2 years. And they're not young guys. I mean, they're late 20s, early 30s, but they, instead of just grinding it on the road, they sat and made this beautiful record, 1.5 to 2 years, and it just panned out. And it's just all about taking your time and making it like the best product, because it's sort of pointless.
It is, obviously. I mean, obviously in our forum, that's your biggest, your biggest card is the show, and taking that through. And I think I agree with Steven. It's best foot forward always.
Talked about domestic. Canada is a pretty big country. If you want to tour it, you kind of have to drive long stretches with nothing in between sometimes. It's kind of easier just to drop across the border and do some shows. Maybe talk a little bit about how you get playing in the States. If you ever want to take a jaunt into Europe, what kind of things you have to think about, how easy is it to do, maybe some thoughts on international.
I book my bands in the U.S. It's a beast. The U.S. is a crazy-ass country. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's really hard to get into. There's no surefire answer. I sort of lucked out in a way, in such that I started booking Tokyo Police Club until they found another agent, and then I sort of ran with it, and it snowballed fast enough, and I'm like, hey, wait, I can do this. And then I started doing the rest of my bands. And it's the same approach in Canada. There's no, aside from the fact that rules are so fucked up now with the border, is I wouldn't try any games to get across. And it's a certain financial burden to do it the official way. So there's a lot of things to think about and have in check. And you almost want to start, you don't want to just, I don't know, I mean, you don't just want to, you're not just going to break out in the United States by playing that show in New York. You're just going to have that crazy experience when you pay $150 for parking, you get your gear stolen, and 3 people are at the show. Like, that is so classic. And it happened to Tokyo Police Club on their first time. But it's just about sort of being a little more strategic, having a few, maybe some blogger fans down there, like a few champions who can, even if it's just 2 or 3 people, and start rounding it up. And now with the whole border issue, I mean, that's a whole other almost...
Well, I have 2 things to say. Going on the border issue, there's a band on our roster, which we'll name nameless. About 2 years ago, from Vancouver, I was going to do a couple gigs like Seattle, LA, all down the West Coast. Went to the border, said, not doing anything, just going on a little trip. One of the border guys recognized one of the players from the band, Googled on the spot the band's name, and on the MySpace had a list of the U.S. venues that they were going to.
Seattle, that night.
Yeah, 5-year band. They cannot enter the U.S.
I know who you're talking about, and safe to say, party's over.
Yeah, funny.
2-1 Boston.
I knew that
2-1, sorry?
2-1 Boston.
Could I get a vodka water, please?
Party.
That too.
No, what I wanted to say is, I come across a lot of bands that will say, you know what, Canadian, I think our music, people in Europe will get, or people in England or the States. I mean, great, if that's your ambitions, go ahead, but I would definitely suggest try to make plans to conquer this country and market to market here. I think you'll have a lot better success doing that way, as opposed to like, oh, I think people in New York are going to get my music, as opposed to people in Montreal or Toronto. I would say concentrate on this market for come up with a story here before you go anywhere else.
Live is a tricky thing, there's no question, and it's getting tougher. And like these guys said, I mean, the permits and the visas and everything that goes on to get across the border. But what's happened as a result of that, and I think it was simpler back in the good old days, is that you now have, and I don't want to be that dude standing up here saying the internet, but you do have these international communication tools, and you can grow interest internationally without playing there. And when the opportunity actually makes sense sense, somebody from those territories will step up and help you facilitate that. And so maybe it's not about going down and playing for 3 people and getting your gear stolen. It's more about finding a fan amongst the crowd of people that check music out on the net and finding